fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back to the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren, and we got Smoker Joe here.
Smoker Joe.
You're putting your meat. I can't believe you put your meat on Facebook. How disgusting.
People, the amount of responses I've got on my meat have been really encouraging. So
that's good.
Take that.
Yeah, makes you feel good, doesn't it?
That's all I got. It shows you just how shallow and lonely I am. That's as good as it gets. Somebody says, nice corned beef. Let's be specific here.
Well, it's a start, right?
But I have done wings. I heard that Buffalo has pretty good wings. What do you think?
Well, but that's the question. Do buffalo wings really come from Buffalo?
Well, I'll have to ask Steve. He's the professional.
I got the answer.
Is he the professional of wings, or is he the professional of Buffalo? Well, we've got a guest with us, and he writes books, and I'm not sure why, but he writes books. And has them.
He lives in Buffalo.
Because he lives in Buffalo. Yes, because if you get enough of them, you can burn them, right? And that keeps you warm. Right? Keeps you warm. Oh, that's a whole different case. Don't be getting into that, right? I mean, gotten enough trouble with the last show, thanks to you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Holy cow! Wow.
People wake up for hating him. I'm first in line. So go
ahead. Yeah. And anybody, just send it to Joe. He loves it because he's very lonely with his meat.
Constructive criticism and feedback. I love it. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about After Pearl and maybe wings. So we've got Stephen Eoannou. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, it's just wonderful. So what is it with buffalo wings? Do they really come from Buffalo?
Yeah. This is the question of the show.
The chicken wing that you order out at the restaurants was invented in Buffalo at a place called the Anchor Bar on Main Street in the mid-'40s. And it has taken off, and it's become one of the foods associated with Buffalo and Western New York. And if you're ever in town, you can check out Frank and Teresa's Anchor Bar, where they were invented. But my favorite place is not the Anchor Bar, actually. There's a lot of great places for wings in Buffalo. So you might want to check out Bar Bill's, for instance, or Duff's.
See, I thought you were going to say, if you're ever in town, I'll buy the wings. But he didn't do that. You notice that?
No. Well,
it's a great show. Thanks for joining.
We got to sell some books before I...
Yeah, I was going to say, he's got to sell some more books to afford the wings, right? You're going to get some books out of there, right? Before we get into the book itself, what's your history, like writing, and what got you into doing this, where you actually write books and publish them?
It started really in high school in the late 70s, I guess it was, when John Irving released The Hotel New Hampshire. I remember reading that book, and when I got to the end thinking, man, I want to write something like that. But I really didn't start until I was, I think, a sophomore at the University of Buffalo and took my first creative writing class. And I was hooked after that. And that's where I really decided that I wanted to write and publish novels, especially. And I went on to grad school, and this was about the time where folks like Bret Easton Ellis and Jay McInerney and Brett Lott, they were all getting published. They were all American male writers around 30 or just under 30, maybe about 4 or 5 years older than me. And I thought, well, I'll just be like one of those guys. I'm in grad school. I'm working on a novel. I'll be published before I'm 30. So that was the plan. And then, my 30th birthday came and passed, and my 40th birthday came and passed, and my 50th birthday came and passed. So it wasn't until I turned 52 that I got my first book published, which was a short story collection called Muscle Cars. But After Pearl comes out on May 1st, and that will be my fourth book and third novel. So I'm an overnight success after 40 years.
Yeah, and you don't look a day over 20.
Yeah, well, alcohol's a preservative, so.
Yeah, he's soaking in it.
Believe everything you see on the web. Believe Steve's picture.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. And now you're getting into this book. Now, this is kind of After Pearl, so it's a historical fiction, but you're also kind of got the noir sort of detective thing going on. So maybe talk about the premise of the book first, and then we'll rip it apart.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that part of the show.
Your turn.
After Pearl really came about, because I had watched the movie like the night before. I was thinking of what my next writing project would be, and I happened to watch a detective movie, and the private eye was so one-dimensional. He was so stereotypical of all the kind of like noir detectives that I was really annoyed by it. And the next day I was sitting at a bar nursing a bourbon thinking, man, I wish I could write something different, a different type of PI. And out of the blue, Norman Mailer said that writing's the spooky art and ideas come from you out of nowhere. I thought of this guy. It was a friend of my mom's that she grew up with. His nickname was Mickey the Bug, because he was kind of like this insect-like guy, kind of shady, a gambler. And during World War II, he was stationed out, or he was out in San Francisco waiting to be deployed to the Pacific. And he got drunk, and he stepped out on the street, and he got hit by a cab. And his injuries were so bad that after he healed, he wasn't deployed. They sent him back home to Buffalo. So out of the blue, I thought of this guy I haven't thought in 30 years, can barely picture his face. And I thought, man, what if I had a detective that stepped in front of a cab, either on purpose, maybe he was pushed, maybe he was drunk, maybe he did it to get out of the draft and not fight in World War II. And what if that accident made him, physically handicapped? And I took a sip of my bourbon as I sat there drinking by myself and thought, well, what if he's an alcoholic? And all of a sudden I thought, well, that's my PI. He's going to be opposite of the stereotypical, cool talking, strong walking private eye, and he's going to have a lot of issues that he's going to have to deal with. So I want to put a kind of like a soft-boiled private eye in a hard-boiled world and see what happens.
Sort of like Joe.
Yeah. And like a few days after I thought of that, COVID hit. We were locked down. I was alone in a one-eyed dog in a very large house, and I just started writing what turned out to be After Pearl. And I wrote to escape. I wrote to escape COVID, and I didn't think it was going to be published. I blogged about it, saying this is just like an escapism piece, and lo and behold, it turned out to be a novel that my publisher wanted.
Well, what about the one-eyed dog? That sounds like a good story. PI with the one-eyed dog.
Yeah, well, the novel, as I said, Bishop is an alcoholic, and the novel begins where he wakes up on the floor of the Hotel Lafayette. And he has lost everything. He's lost his detective agency. He's lost his apartment. He's lost his secretary, who he's secretly in love with. And he was taking a job as the hotel detective at the Lafayette, which he thinks is the lowest rung on the private eye ladder. And he wakes up on the floor after a 5-day bender, and he can't remember anything. But there's been 2 shots fired from his gun, and the police are looking for him to ask him about a missing lounge singer who was last seen leaving the nightclub with Bishop. And there's a little one-eyed dog in his apartment that he doesn't know where it came from. He names the dog Jake, and then later finds out it's female, but decides to keep Jake as her name. So Bishop's got a lot of stuff going on.
So does Mickey the Bug know that you've influenced him or been using him?
Mick passed away decades ago, so I think I'm good with him.
Well, actually, we have him on the line right now.
Please start us now.
How did that happen?
Long distance caller.
Yeah. Tell me about writing historical fiction, 'cause it's on my list of things to do. I mean, you're writing about where you are, so I'm sure that the setting, Buffalo, is a character in this book. I'm just kind of wondering how you piece together the historical fiction piece of it. What's historic and what's fiction?
Yeah, I all 3 of my novels are set in Buffalo. I had decided really after the first novel, Rook, which is based on a true story about a man named Al Nussbaum. And Al grew up in Buffalo, lived in Buffalo, would tell his wife he's going out of town for work occasionally, but Al's real work was robbing banks, and he robbed about a half dozen before his wife or the FBI knew what he was up to. when I finished that novel, it was historical fiction based on a true life character. I thought, my short story collection, the stories are all based in Buffalo, even if I don't mention the setting. If people are from this area, they know that it's Buffalo. They recognize the landmarks like Volker's Bowling Alley, which they're just tearing down now, and Forest Lawn Cemetery. And now I've written this novel about a Buffalo bank robber. I really enjoyed it, and I thought, well, okay, I want to carve out Buffalo as my literary turf, kind of like William Kennedy did for Albany, New York, or what Stephen King does for Maine. My turf is going to be Buffalo, New York. And then I grew up with a family of readers and a family of storytellers, and my dad was a wonderful storyteller, and I loved to hear his stories about growing up in Buffalo in the 1930s and 1940s when he came over from Greece and lived in a Greek neighborhood and lived above my grandfather's restaurant, and would tell these fantastic stories about these real people, but just true characters that would come in my grandfather's restaurant. And a lot of those characters worked their way into Yesteryear, my second novel. There was Lefty, the dog thief, who would steal dogs during the Depression. Well, he stole anything, but he would steal dogs and sell them to make money. Jimmy Slattery, who was a light heavyweight champion from Buffalo, whose career was shortened by alcoholism. He used to come in my grandfather's restaurant, so I put him in Yesteryear. And I really enjoyed not only researching the city from that era, reading through old newspapers and interweaving my family history and my dad's stories into it. And I had great fun doing that in Yesteryear. And so I thought, well, let's continue it with this Nicholas Bishop series of books and have it set in the same neighborhood with maybe some crossover characters, but certainly crossover locations and settings. And so I'm kind of carving out a specific neighborhood in the city, and it's kind of great fun going back and researching it. And a lot of the buildings are still there, the Hotel Lafayette, for instance, so I can go and sit in the lobby. It hasn't changed that much in 80 years, 90 years, and can daydream and take notes. So the research has been a great bit of fun when I'm doing these historical novels.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I had created my town, which is actually my hometown. I just changed the name because I didn't want to be worrying about people saying that's not the way it was. How could you write that? You're wrong. Do you have any concerns about people saying, or if you're fictionizing things, saying that's not the way it really was, or you made a mistake here, that building wasn't on that corner?
No one has said that to me yet. The few that have asked me about something, did that really happen? And I say, no, it's fiction. It's a novel. It's fiction. It wasn't Rook was not a biography of Al Nussbaum, the bank robber. It was me imagining his life on the run and his wife he left behind. The only time someone has really called me out on something, I got to meet Al's daughter, who's about my age. She was just an infant in Rook, my first novel. And I got to meet her and talk to her, and she said, you know what, you got something wrong. And I thought, oh, here we go. And she said, that bank, that opening scene where they're robbing the bank in Brooklyn? And I go, yeah. And she goes, you got them putting the money in an army duffel bag. And I go, yeah, I know your dad was, in the army, and, he was a marksman, and I just figured, duffel bag. And she goes, oh, no. Dad preferred to put his stolen money in American Touristers. So that was a great detail that I wish I knew while I was writing the book. But so far, that's the only one that I've been called out on as being historically inaccurate.
Well, let me ask this: How many do you interview people? Would you have considered interviewing here?
I did, actually. I did reach out to her while I was, in the early stages of drafting that book. I emailed her a couple times, and she never got back to me. So I figured, okay, I get it. She doesn't want, someone co-opting her family and her father's story. She doesn't want to talk to me. And then when the book came out a few years later, I was interviewed by a local television station, and I didn't know this, but they had also tracked her down. She just lives in Syracuse, a couple hours away, and interviewed her as well. And she got in contact with me after that, and she apologized for losing my email address, and she would have loved to have worked with me on that book and helped me draft it, but life got in the way. Her mom got sick and passed away, then she was in a car accident, and then she lost my email, so it just didn't work out with that particular interview. But yeah, if I could have a do-over, I would have loved to have talked to her, those early stages of note gathering and research for Rook.
Whose point of view do you write this in?
So After Pearl is written through Nicholas Bishop, my private eye's point of view, which is a bit of a challenge, right? Because he can't remember the last 5 days of his life. So he has to piece together those missing days to figure out what happened to this lounge singer. His car's missing. What happened to that? Who did he shoot? There's two bullets missing from his gun. Who did he fire at? So I'm working through the eyes of a character who has missing 5 days of his life, and what memories he has are very foggy, and he's trying to retrace his footsteps. So that was a challenge for me as a writer. And as he learns when the readers learn what happens. So that was kind of fun too.
How do you work out the dialogue? How do you make the dialogue work with him and the other characters and stuff? Do you sit around home and word it out loud?
Yeah, I actually write everything out loud. So it's really annoying if you're in the house with me. I'm writing because I'll repeat the same sentence over and over, or repeat the same sentence but change the word and then repeat it again over and over. Even my one-eyed dog gets annoyed with me and leaves the room.
You could do that at the bar, right?
Yeah. Who's the guy sitting by himself talking to himself?
Yeah.
So dialogue, even it took me 30 years to get published. Even those dark days that I call them, I was always pretty good at dialogue. It came pretty naturally to me. And it's gotten better, especially working with my editor, Adam Sergernay. And the dialogue, as you said, I actually read it aloud, I say it aloud as I'm writing. I write dialogue very quickly. I don't do a lot of attribution or, physical gestures or internal monologue. It's that first go through, that first pass is really like reading a stage play. It is just dialogue. And then I go back and tighten it up. And add those gestures and attribution and internal thoughts and flesh it out over multiple revisions. So I'm kind of different. A lot of people write, they say just write quickly, just get it all down, and then you can go back and fix it. And I am too anal for that. I will work on a sentence or a piece of dialogue over and over till I think I have it as good as I can get it before I move on to the next paragraph or the next chapter.
So do you think reading it out kind of makes it makes it sound more real?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And and I read like everything, and when I'm writing, I read it out loud, whether it's dialogue or just the narrative. I read it all loud because I can hear it like a misstruck note. You say, oh, that's too wordy, or there's an unintentional rhyme in that sentence that I didn't realize when I was writing it, but I hear it, and I can go back and correct it. So yeah, reading aloud while writing and editing was really it's nothing new, but it was a game changer for me in my writing, I think, when I finally stumbled upon doing that.
And your neighbors.
Yeah, they love that. They love it when they hear me at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Screaming, I'm going to kill you.
Freeze!
I use, at some point, a software program called Speechify.
Yeah.
I can put anything in there and hear it back. Because if I'm reading it, I'm quality controlling as I'm reading. But if I'm just sitting and listening to myself, listening to the words, then I can hear it. And it's a great program. You just put anything, it's almost free. and you could have Morgan Freeman read it back or whoever. It's just nice. I like to hear it read to me.
This episode is brought to you by
Speechify. I recommend it. It sounds like you came up with your detective first, and then you wrap the story around it. Is that how you normally work?
Yeah, I usually start with the character. Who do I want to write about? Who do I want to learn about? Who do I want to explore? And I am a fly by my seat of the pants type of author, so I don't have an outline that I've worked on. I don't have sticky notes all over the wall. What I do is once I do my research until I feel like I have enough to start, I'll just dive in. And when I finish a chapter, that's when I'll outline the chapter. Okay, this is what happened. Here are the characters. Here was the scene. So I'm outlining as I'm going along. And a lot of my plots, I think I have a lot of balls in the air, a lot of complicated plots and subplots and threads that I'm kind of pulling through the book. And outline it like that, I can see if I've dropped an idea or dropped a subplot. So, I haven't talked about their character since chapter 3. It helps me visualize and pull things through. So yeah, the characters come first, the situation, and then I come up with the mystery, if you will, or the caper that needs to be explored and written.
Do you know how it's going to end?
When I start out, no, I don't. But
let's talk about the ending.
But in addition to that outlining, I am also taking notes. Make sure this happens. Make sure you cover these 3 points. Bishop needs to go to this location to get this information. So it is gradually coming to me as I'm writing. And I think a lot of times when I was a younger writer and wasn't getting published, I didn't have the faith in myself or the muse or where ideas come from that I would figure it out. But now I trust, now I think it's going to come to me sooner or later. I will figure out the right path and just keep writing. And if I get stuck, say I'm stuck at chapter 4, I'll go back to the beginning and start revising and polishing, and I'll go right through chapter 3, and invariably I'll by that time I'll have figured out what the next step should be.
So how well do you know your characters? What kind of relationship? Do you hear them? Do you kind of picture them? Do you kind of have an idea, a sound of their voice in your mind?
Not so much their voice, but certainly I have an image of them, their physical appearance, and certainly I have a good sense of their personality. And that was especially true with Bishop's secretary, who becomes his partner, Gia Alessi. And I wanted her to be a very strong female character, decades ahead of her time. She doesn't want to be Bishop's assistant or his secretary or receptionist. She wants to be a private eye. And it's 1942. Women are entering the workforce to work in the factories as the men go off to fight. And she wants to go out in the world and be a PI. So I knew I wanted to make her very strong. I knew I had to make her be able to hold her own with Bishop and suspects and take no nonsense from anybody. And so in a lot of ways, she is the stronger and better detective of the pair. And she was great fun to write.
Well, let's go with that, because this is sort of my next question. Beyond the entertainment and noir value of it, you're going back in the past. There was issues in the past that may not have been resolved or certainly different than today. Do you address those in, like, the women in the issues that were from the 50s, 40s, and that, or whatever it might be? Do you address those in the book as themes, or are they just kind of there to get the entertainment rolling?
No, I think it works as both, right? Both entertainment, the funny, sassy dialogue that Gia has. Certainly that was intended to be entertaining and funny, but also, you're kind of subtly pointing out through the veil of time, things weren't always like this, in this case with women and the opportunities they had, and they really had to seize it and make it their own. And then it struck me as I was researching the novel and going through old newspapers from that era at the library on the microfiche machine, really how much hasn't changed. You know, the same things are in the news today that were in the news 80, 90 years ago. You know, certainly, you know, the rise of fascism, white supremacy. You know, we're still talking about that 90 years later. And writing historical fiction kind of draws attention to that, but it's through the lens of time. So it's not beating the head over the reader with a theme, but it's saying, hey, this is what part of the times. It was World War II. We're fighting fascism, and hopefully people can make the connection that, yeah, you know, we're still fighting it today.
I was going to say, thank God we don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah.
Time heals all.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's resolved, and we all live well now.
Yep. Time is not a circle.
Yeah. So is there a type of subtext or a meaning that you want people to get out of the book, even if it kind of happened organically?
I guess, again, you know, Gia's character is one that's strong and emerging, and she's definitely going to be, obviously, a main character in the subsequent novels in the series. So it's you know, seeing her come into her own as a woman in the 1940s, I think, is, you know, part of the theme that I was exploring. But also one of the major themes was really I wanted my main character, Nick Bishop, to have consequences for his actions. So for instance, how many times have you read, you know, a hard-boiled mystery or watched one on TV or in the theaters, and there's really no consequences, right? Your main character can drink a quart of bourbon and he's fine. He may wake up the next morning and like, rub his forehead a little bit and splash some water on his face, and he's good to go. There's no consequences for drinking that bottle of bourbon. And I wanted to show the consequences. So I tried to depict Bishop's drinking and alcoholism not in a romanticized way that you so often see in noir fiction, but more in a realistic way. And I wanted him to have, you know, insecurities and issues and like a full rounded character. I just didn't want him to be a single-dimensional private eye that you've seen 1,000 times before. So part of my kind of goal with this book is to show a detective that was dealing with his consequences and really trying to get back to where he was before the novel even started, when he was sober and had a detective agency and by all accounts was doing pretty well for himself. So this is about as much as regaining what he was as much as it is about a character growing and moving forward.
So are you happy with how the character developed and how it ended with that character? Like how they threw the book from beginning to the end?
Yeah, I am. Because, you know, the character needs to grow, needs to change, or at least attempting it. And I think by the time you get to the end of After Pearl, Bishop seems to be on the right path again. Whether he stays on that in book 2, The Falling Woman, that comes out in spring of 2027, we'll have to see, right? But at least Bishop is in a better place at the end than he was in the beginning of After Pearl.
Are you keeping track of, this is obviously going to be a series with this character, and so are you keeping track of how and the things that happen and how the other characters interact with them?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. This was never intended to be a series. Like I said, I wrote it during the pandemic, just something for myself, you know, escapism. And I have a great support group of writers that I've been working with for 15 years. And when I finished a draft, I sent it off to Carla Dameron, who's a wonderful crime fiction writer. She wrote The Orchid Tattoo, which is one of my favorite books. And when she read it, the first question she asked me, she goes, "Was this a series?" And I said, "No, it's just a one-off. I wrote it during COVID. You know, it's a standalone." So she gave me feedback and criticism, and I did a revision, and I sent it off to another person in our group, Ashley Warlick, who's finishing up her first thriller novel. She wrote The Arrangement, was her last novel. And the first question she asked me was, "Well, is this a series? Because I think this could be a series." And I go, no. I wrote it during the pandemic, one-off, standalone. So she gives me advice. I revise it, turn it into my publisher, and he said, "Is this a series? Because I think somebody like Netflix would like this." And I paused and I said, "Yes, it's a series," with no idea about a second or third book. But now I'm on the hook, right? I don't have any story ideas. And so after the initial panic was over, I thought, well, wait a minute. I have more than I usually have, right? I've got a main character. I've got the setting. I've got the time period. I've got all these secondary characters that were in After Pearl in a minor role that I could pull forward to have a major role in the second book. And so that's what I did. I went and looked, and I said, okay, and After Pearl, we find out that his mother had left Bishop when he was a teenager, and then his mentor in the private eye world had also disappeared and left him. And now they return in The Falling Woman. And so I get to explore those relationships with Bishop and coming to terms with those two characters. So yeah, to answer your question, I've got these characters in this world I've created that were minor characters in After Pearl or barely mentioned, and now I'm trying to make them full-fledged characters and part of the second novel.
So what do you think you get out of these books when you write?
Oh, I still have my day job, so I write from 5 to 7 o'clock in the morning, every day in the morning. I shoot for 7 days a week, and invariably those 2 hours of the day are the best 2 hours of my day. I've always enjoyed pushing words and letters and sentences around on the page. Just the act of writing it just gives me joy. It just gives me pleasure. Even when it doesn't go well, some days you don't write too much or you don't write very well, but it is still the best part of my day because at least I'm doing what I want and I have some control, although the characters kind of go in their own direction a lot of the times. But yeah, it is the best part of my day. So I get a lot of joy, just the act of writing. And it took me so long to get published, to see it actually a physical book of my own that I can hold and show people, show my kids. There's a lot of validation that takes place. And because it took me so long to get published, when I say, thank you for having me, I'm really glad to be here. I really am glad to be here because for 30 years, no one would talk to me or read my stuff. So this is just all gravy at this point.
Well, I wanted to talk to the one-eyed dog.
Yeah.
I don't know where you came along.
We've been drinking one-eyed dog.
Yeah, I don't know. Geez, Anyway. Well, let's talk about where people find you. Do you have like a lemonade stand, or what bar do you go to? Do you have social media? Website?
Yeah, I've got all those things and favorite bars as well. But, the most information you can find about me is at my website, which is www.sg, and then my last name, EOANNOU.com. And there is a ton of information out on that website. The events that are coming up, book trailers, excerpts, my short stories, links to my short stories. But I tell people the most important page on that website is the last one. That's the contact page. I love to hear from readers, getting feedback from them, and I answer all the emails. So I love to hear from people who read my work and then reach out. Social media-wise, you can find me on, Twitter and Blue Sky and Facebook.
Well, there you go. Well, of course, we'll have all of that up on our website as well, so people can find you and hunt you down, and it's all good. It's all good. So the book, After Pearl, and that's May 1st, right? That's the date it's coming out.
Yeah, it's coming up fast. And May's going to be a very busy month, a lot of readings, interviews, a lot of author showcases. So May is going to be a busy month as After Pearl comes out into the world.
After today's interview, you won't need any more.
Well, it's all downhill from here, guys. You know that.
Yeah, you're at the top.
You said that, not me.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you for being on the show, and take care.
Thank you so much.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.
It's Eoannou.